20 years ago, a poor young man chose to walk away from the girl he loved, leaving behind a secret no one knew, a child. 20 years later, he had become a cold-hearted millionaire until a phone call shattered the world he had built. Your son is dying. Only your blood can save him. From the sterile chill of a hospital ward to the vibrant colors of an art gallery in London, this story follows three people fighting against prejudice, judgment, and the fears within their hearts. They must learn how to forgive, trust, and rediscover family among the broken fragments of the past. Because some battles are not only for survival but for the right to be loved, even after 20 years apart. Adrian Clarke often told his employees that life was no different from an abstract painting if you looked at it long enough. Streaks of color seemed chaotic, lines sharp and incomprehensible, but then, in some fleeting moment through the light, the angle, or the state of mind, the painting suddenly revealed its meaning. That afternoon, at 3:47, as the pale autumn sunlight streamed through the chilled glass walls on the 31st floor of Clarke Digital Arts in London, Adrian felt like he was having such a moment. He had just ended a shareholders' meeting, the quarter's profits enough to salivate the financial magazines. Outside, the Thames shimmered, the London eye turned lazily, and inside, the oak-panelled silence of the room radiated a sense of peace. He was 45, silver already threading his hair, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, the very image of a successful businessman. Yet deep inside, Adrian still felt the same emptiness, the void that had haunted him for 20 years. He walked quietly to the glass wall, exhaled a weary sigh, then his phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number lit up the screen. Adrian, it's Amara. Samuel is dying. Only your blood can save him. Please. The phone slipped from his hand and struck the glass table with a sharp, shattering echo. Adrian froze, his eyes locked on the words as though rereading them might make them change. Amara Johnson, 20 years. Her name had never left his memory, though he had changed his surname, cut every tie, and built an empire of technology to bury a choice made in youth. Adrian tried to breathe, but his throat tightened. Samuel, a child, his child, a life hanging by a thread. In a flash, he saw again the damp student lodging in Manchester where 21-year-old Amara, eyes ablaze with the dream of becoming a pediatric surgeon, had once shared her hopes. And he, 23, was a young man convinced that art was the only salvation for his soul. 2 kids, 2 dreams, 1 love. And then he had walked away. His heartbeat thundered. He snatched up the phone. A second message appeared. He's 21. St. Mary's Hospital, Manchester, pediatric hematology. Please, he's my whole world. Adrian collapsed into a chair, trembling. All the wealth, accolades, and empire he had built was suddenly meaningless. The office door opened. Miranda, his longtime assistant, entered with the evening schedule in hand. Mr. Clarke, the car is waiting to take you to the dinner. Cancel everything. His voice was hoarse. Miranda froze, startled by her boss's pallor. Are you all right? You look as if you've seen a ghost. Adrian turned, eyes bloodshot. Book me a fast train to Manchester, or a flight, anything. I need to get there immediately. She had never seen him like this, but she didn't question. She nodded and left at once. Alone again, Adrian looked out toward the river. The city pulsed with life. Double-decker buses crowded the bridges, and people hurried along the pavements. The world hadn't stopped, but for Adrian, time had fractured. Samuel, a 21-year-old son, every step of his life, his first days at school, the midnight fevers, the birthdays Adrian had missed. And now, when his life hung in the balance, Adrian only now learned he existed. Pain surged like a tide. He remembered the last time he had seen Amara, standing in their cramped kitchen, wearing his oversized T-shirt, tears glimmering in her eyes as she asked, Adrian, why? We had our future planned. And he, a coward, had lied. We're not right for each other. You should chase your dream, don't let me hold you back. He had thought it a noble sacrifice. In truth, it was cowardice. The phone rang. The screen flashed a Manchester number. With shaking hands, Adrian answered. Adrian? The woman's voice trembled, breaking yet so familiar it made his chest constrict. Amara. His lips formed the name, as if it had waited 20 years to be spoken again. For a heartbeat, both were silent. He heard her quickened breath, like an echo of the past returning. "It really is you," Amara whispered. "Oh God, I'm on my way. Tell me everything. Please." On the other end, her words tumbled through tears. Samuel, their son, was battling severe aplastic anemia. Months of treatments had failed. His only hope was a bone marrow transplant from a family member. She had tried. No match. Adrian, his father, was the final chance. With every word, Adrian felt his chest tighten, as though crushed by invisible hands. He longed to tear away 20 years, to step back into that kitchen and choose another answer. But time allowed no mercy. There was only one truth. His son's life depended on him. "Amara," Adrian whispered, tears stinging his eyes. "I'm coming. I won't leave. Hold on for our son. I'm on my way." He ended the call and stood frozen before the glass wall. Adrian Clarke thought nothing of companies, shares, or reputation for the first time in years. His mind held only the image of a young man named Samuel lying in a hospital bed, and of the woman he had never stopped loving. Outside, twilight dimmed across the Thames. Yet for the first time in 2 decades, Adrian glimpsed a fragile light within the darkness, a chance to save his son, and perhaps to save himself. The high-speed train pulled out of Euston just after 4 o'clock, racing north through dark green fields already tinged with yellow beneath the heavy drizzle of late autumn England. In the first-class carriage, Adrian Clarke sat silently by the window, his back sinking into the leather seat, one hand gripping a cup of black coffee long since gone cold. He watched raindrops streak down the glass, blurring the landscape outside until it looked like unfinished oil paintings, indistinct, incomplete. He was no stranger to these express trains, yet never had a journey felt so unbearably long. Each minute, each second on the way to Manchester stretched into eternity, and inside his mind, memories from 2 decades past rose. For perhaps the first time in many years, Adrian was not thinking about board meetings, multi-million-pound deals, or the financial press calling him the man who redefined digital art. Instead, all he could think of was Amara and Samuel, the son he had never known, now lying in a hospital bed. He heard her voice again, the voice of the young woman she had been, bright, determined, filled with fire. Amara Johnson, 21 then, was in her white lab coat, still stained with ink from long study nights. She had sat across from him in their tiny shared apartment near the university, surrounded by towering stacks of medical textbooks, and declared with burning resolve, "One day, I'll operate on the children the world has forgotten. I'll be there when their parents have lost all hope. I want to give them a chance to live." Adrian had only smiled, his eyes tracing every line of her face, his heart swelling with pride and love. He had once believed nothing could break that bond. But everything changed the following summer, when Amara's acceptance letter from the prestigious Manchester Medical School fell into the hands of Eleanor Johnson, her mother. He remembered that day vividly. Eleanor, tall, stern, surrounded by shelves of law books and the cold smell of oak, had summoned him to her office. She laid the letter on the desk, pushed it toward him, and spoke with the clarity of a verdict. "Do you understand what this means, Clarke? My daughter has just been offered an opportunity that thousands of privileged white students can only dream of, and yet she thinks of throwing it away for you." Adrian had sat in silence, his heart pounding like a drum. Eleanor's sharp gaze pierced him as she went on. "Who are you, Adrian Clarke? A penniless art student, a romantic dreamer with no future. What can you give her, except a life of hardship and broken dreams? My daughter will be a doctor who changes the world, not a woman wasting her youth to keep you warm in a freezing studio while you paint pictures no one will ever buy." What had he done then? He remembered staring for hours at the paper with Amara's name printed in the corner, imagining her giving it all up to stay with him. And in that moment, he believed Eleanor. He believed that loving Amara meant stealing away her future. A few weeks later, in their small kitchen, he had broken her heart. Amara had stood before him, hair tied back, eyes swollen with tears, demanding again and again, "Why? We said we'd face everything together. Do you think I'm not strong enough? Or is it yourself you don't trust?" Adrian had not told the truth. Instead, he lied that they weren't right for each other, that youthful love would fade, that she should be free to soar higher. And then he had walked away, leaving her sobs behind him. The train plunged into a dark tunnel, jolting him back to the present. Adrian closed his eyes, his back hunched, fingers digging into the armrest. 20 years had passed, yet every word, every glance remained alive as though it were yesterday. He wondered if Amara could ever forgive him, or if, in her eyes, he would always be the coward who fled. His phone vibrated on the small table by his seat. A new email from the communications team lit up. Urgent interview request. BBC would like to discuss Clarke Digital Art's new vision. Adrian stared at the line, then gave a bitter smile. Years ago, when he had changed his name from Andrew Kowalski, the Polish surname few remembered, to Adrian Clarke, he had meant to cut off every trace of the past. He built a brand of cold detachment, never appearing at exhibitions, never showing a painting of his own hand. Yet now, all that success felt hollow, laughably so. He had a multi-billion-pound company, hundreds of employees, prestigious awards, yet no family. No child to call his father, no warm meal waiting after work, only long nights in a luxury riverside flat, with expensive wine and an emptiness that never lifted. Now the truth stood stark before him. He did have a family, one he had abandoned, a son he had never held, never seen, now clinging to life, needing his blood and marrow, a woman he had never stopped loving yet, who might now be a stranger. Adrian leaned against the window, staring at the grey sky beyond. He wondered what Samuel looked like. Did he have Amara's deep, dark eyes, or Adrian's own shy smile of youth? Did he know how to draw? Did he love art the way Adrian once had? Or did he know his father only as a missing name on official forms? The train swayed through a bend. Adrian closed his eyes, and more memories flooded, chaotic, urgent. Long nights at the easel, trying and failing to capture Amara's face. In the mornings when he promised himself he would call her, he faltered, delayed, and let time steal her away. Conferences where he heard the name Dr. Amara Johnson praised with respect, and his heart clenched with pride he no longer had the right to feel. An announcement echoed through the carriage. The next stop was Stockport, just minutes from Manchester Piccadilly. Adrian opened his eyes, drawing a long, steady breath. He knew this train was not carrying him only to a city, but to the heart of his buried past. He would see Amara again. He would meet Samuel, and he would have to face the question he had never dared confront. What had he lost when he left them, and was there still any chance to make it right? The brakes screeched as the train slid into the station, neon lights casting a harsh glow across his gaunt face. Adrian adjusted his coat, tightened his grip on the phone in his hand, and for the first time in many years, he felt stripped of the cold armor of a London millionaire. He was only a man running from an old mistake now, forced to turn back and face it. Manchester always carried a distinctive scent, damp, metallic, with a lingering trace of coal from its industrial past. The moment Adrian Clarke stepped out of Piccadilly Station, the smell struck him like a knife, dragging him back to the years of poverty he had once endured in this city. Pulling his coat tighter, he pushed through the crowd and hailed a black cab. When the driver asked where to, his voice caught before he could answer. St. Mary's Hospital. Pediatrics. The taxi rolled forward, threading through familiar and foreign streets. Adrian had avoided Manchester for years as though it were an open wound. Yet now, every corner seemed to whisper of Amara, the cafe where they once argued about Picasso, the library where she studied sleepless nights, the cobbled path leading to their student flats. All of it remained unchanged, only they had changed. Adrian stood still under the fine, misting rain when the cab stopped before the hospital. St. Mary's rose stark and white before him, its glass windows reflecting the grey sky. People hurried in and out, each carrying their own private burden of worry. As he stepped through the revolving doors, the heavy scent of disinfectant assaulted him, a smell that never leaves anyone who has walked hospital corridors. At the reception, he called Samuel Johnson Clarke, pediatric hematology. The grey-haired woman behind the desk stared at him for a beat before replying, 6th floor, room 612, elevator to your right. Thank you, Adrian muttered, his voice as rough as gravel. The elevator crept upward, each number lighting with the solemn beat of a funeral drum. Adrian caught his reflection in the steel door's hollow cheeks, eyes shadowed with a rare fear. For years, he had faced the media with calm composure, a cool smile. Now, he was only a father who had never been one, about to meet a dying son. The doors opened. The sixth-floor corridor was blindingly white, eerily still. Adrian walked past closed doors, each concealing a story of hope and dread. He stopped at 612, and there, leaning against the wall, was Amara Johnson. In that instant, 20 years dissolved. He knew her silhouette, the proud curve of her neck, the brightness in her eyes now dimmed with fatigue. She wore a deep blue scrub coat, and her name was stitched on the chest, Dr. Amara Johnson. His chest tightened. She had achieved her dream, become a doctor, just as he once wished for her. But her radiant eyes now carried lines etched by time and worry. Amara turned. Their eyes met. Both froze, pinned to the weight of memory. Adrian's throat closed, words struggling to form. Adrian. She spoke his name softly, but it rang like a summons from the past. Amara. His voice trembled. There was no smile, no cinematic embrace, only the thick, heavy silence of 20 years, pressing down on every breath. At last, Amara spoke, her tone cold but quivering. You really came. Of course I came. Adrian held her gaze. Our son, he faltered on our, bracing for rejection, but she merely closed her eyes briefly, then gave the faintest nod. Samuel's asleep. He's weak today, but if he wakes, I'll introduce you. They sat side by side on the plastic chairs outside the ward. Adrian wanted to ask 100 questions, to beg 1,000 apologies, but Amara broke the silence first, her voice calm, almost detached. He knows about you. I never spoke ill of you. I told him his father was a free-spirited artist who loved me deeply, but had to go away. He grew up with that story. I didn't want to plant hatred in my son's heart. Adrian's breath caught. Tears filled his eyes before he could stop them. Thank you for not making me a villain to him. Amara tilted her head, meeting his gaze. You didn't need me to. You did that all on your own. The words struck like a blade. Adrian lowered his head, silent. He knew he deserved it. Moments later, the ward door opened. A young nurse stepped out with a gentle smile. Samuel's awake. He's asking for his mother. Amara rose quickly, then hesitated, glancing at Adrian. Conflict flickered in her eyes. Finally, she gave a slight nod. Come with me. Together they entered. Room 612 was bright, the sterile scent of antiseptic mingling with the faint plastic tang of IV tubing. On the bed lay a young man, face thin, skin pale but with dark eyes glowing like coals. When he saw Amara, a fragile smile spread across his lips. Mom. Amara clasped his hand. My love, I've brought someone to meet you. Samuel turned, his gaze landing on Adrian, curious, cautious. He studied him in silence for several seconds, then whispered, It's him, isn't it? Adrian nearly collapsed. He stepped closer, his voice breaking. It's me, Samuel. I'm your father. I'm sorry I came so late. Far too late. The room fell still. Amara held her breath. Samuel looked at him a moment longer, then smiled faintly. Mom was right. I do have your eyes. Adrian sank, clutching his son's hand. And in that moment, all the glory, the regrets, the years of emptiness dissolved into tears. He had found the child he never knew, in the whitewashed walls of Street Mary's under a merciless and redeeming light. Adrian could hardly tear himself from his son's bedside in the first hours after their meeting. He sat there, holding Samuel's hand, studying the frail young man whose thin body still radiated an inexplicable vitality. Samuel spoke little, but every word shook Adrian to the core. When Adrian asked what he liked, Samuel answered, I like to draw. Mom says I got that from you. The words lodged in Adrian's chest like a stone. A vein he thought long-dried quivered, suddenly alive again. Amara stood silently at the foot of the bed, arms folded across her chest. She still wore her navy scrubs, her face composed, but her eyes restless, conflicted, betrayed a storm Adrian dared not decipher. She was both doctor and mother. She knew better than anyone the truth. Aplastic anemia advancing fast, every treatment exhausted. A bone marrow transplant was the last hope, and the tests had already confirmed Adrian Clarke was the only match. When Dr. Henry Patel, the head of the department, entered, the air thickened further. Patel, a stern man of South Asian descent, opened the file, glancing from Amara to Adrian. "We don't have much time. The transplant must happen within the week. Any delay, and the risk of complications rises dramatically." He turned to Adrian, voice firm. "The procedure involves harvesting bone marrow. It's painful, with several days of recovery, but the risk to the donor is extremely low. The question is," he hesitated, eyes flicking toward Amara. Amara continued, her voice steady but trembling underneath. "The question is whether you're willing. This isn't charity, Adrian. This is life or death, not just physical pain responsibility. If Samuel survives, how will you exist in his life?" Adrian raised his head, his gaze clearer than it had been in years. "I'll do everything. Not only because I owe you, but because I owe my son. I'll endure whatever it takes. But Amara, never doubt my love for him." A sharp laugh broke from her, edged with tears. "Love? You disappeared for 20 years. You left me to raise him alone. Under the stairs, the whispers that I'd been abandoned. Do you know what they said? That I was a fool for believing in some nameless artist. I swallowed it all, studied, worked, carried him inside me. And now you return, and think the word love is enough." Adrian's throat tightened. He saw the scars in her eyes, carved deep by time and pride, impossible to erase. But instead of protesting, he nodded. "You're right. I left. I was a coward. But give me this chance not just to save Samuel, but to prove I'm no longer that foolish boy." Silence settled, broken only by the steady beeping of Samuel's monitor. The young man looked at them both and gave a faint smile. "If you two are going to argue, let me join in. I've waited 21 years for this scene." Both Amara and Adrian froze, then glanced at each other. A softness flickered in her eyes, but it vanished quickly, replaced by steel. She turned to Dr. Patel and nodded. "Schedule it. I'll oversee everything." The days that followed were a blur of tests. Adrian endured blood draws, marrow scans, cardiac and liver assessments. He was used to the spotlights of media and boardrooms, not the harsh glare of surgical lamps and antiseptics. Yet he accepted every needle without complaint. Each puncture was a penance. The night before surgery, Adrian couldn't sleep. He sat beside Samuel, watching the boy breathe evenly, his pale face still marked by quiet determination. Amara stepped in and laid a hand gently on the back of Adrian's chair. "You should rest. Tomorrow will be hard. I don't want to close my eyes. If I don't wake up." She cut him off, sharp but trembling. "The risk is minuscule. You'll wake. Don't dramatize this into some hero's sacrifice, Adrian." He turned to her, eyes wet. "I'm not seeking heroism. I want you to know if anything happens, I love you both more than anything." Amara said nothing. For the first time in years, she let her eyes meet his, steady and unflinching. Then she turned away, murmuring, "Sleep. Samuel needs his father awake tomorrow." The next morning, in the operating theater, Adrian lay on the bed under the cold brightness of surgical light, machines humming in rhythm around him. As the anesthetic mask descended, his gaze found Amara through the glass window, standing firm in her coat, eyes steady with resolve. In that instant, Adrian knew, if he woke again, he would never leave their lives. Not ever again. When Adrian opened his eyes, the white light struck his pupils so sharply that he had to squint. His throat was parched, his back ached like someone had carved into it. Machines beeped steadily, and the thick scent of antiseptic hung in the air. It took him several seconds to remember where he was, the recovery ward of Street Mary's, after a 4-hour bone marrow harvest. The first face he saw was Grace Mbaye, Amara's closest friend and the head nurse of the ward. She sat on a plastic chair, eyes warm, smile gentle. "Welcome back, Mr. Clarke. You did well." The harvest was successful. We've already transferred the samples to processing. Samuel will receive the infusion in a few hours. Adrian managed a strained smile, his voice hoarse. Is he all right? Grace nodded. He's stable, though still weak. Amara's with him. She hasn't left his bedside since you went into surgery. A heat swelled in Adrian's chest. He closed his eyes, picturing Amara sitting beside Samuel, holding his hand, worry shadowing her face but strength anchoring her gaze. All these years, he had never seen her as a mother. Just the thought of it now left his throat tight. A moment later, the door opened. Amara entered, still in her scrubs, hair disheveled, dark circles under her eyes. When she saw Adrian awake, she stopped. For a fleeting second, the armor of composure fell, revealing exhaustion and relief. She said nothing, only looked at him. Adrian's lips moved. "You don't need to watch me like that. I'm still here." She exhaled and sat down beside him. "Don't think this means you've fulfilled your duty. This is only the beginning. If Samuel recovers, you'll have to stay. He needs a father, not just bone marrow." "I know," Adrian nodded. "I won't leave again." Silence stretched. Outside, the rattle of a metal cart echoed down the corridor. Finally, Amara spoke softly. "When you left, I cursed you. I told myself I would never forgive you if I ever saw you again. But today, watching you on that operating table, I don't know anymore. Maybe I want to believe you weren't entirely a coward." Adrian turned his face toward her, tears blurring his vision. "I was a coward, but I'm begging for a chance to prove I can change." Amara didn't answer. She stood, adjusted the blanket over him, and moved toward the door. Before leaving, she glanced back, her eyes softer for a fleeting instant. "Rest. Samuel will need to see you strong when he receives the marrow." That afternoon, while Adrian remained in recovery, Samuel underwent the transplant. Amara supervised the procedure alongside Dr. Patel. Hours passed in taut silence. Despite the pain still burning in his body, Adrian insisted that Grace wheel him to the observation room. Through the glass, he saw his son lying motionless, IV tubes running into his veins, the slow stream of stem cells entering his bloodstream. Amara stood at the bedside, hands clasped, lips moving silently in prayer. In that moment, Adrian felt something strange. Never had he belonged to a place as much as he belonged here. Not in glamorous London, not in the high-rise office towers, but in this hospital room with the woman he had once loved and the young man he had never raised, yet who carried his blood. Dr. Patel stepped out, pulling off his mask when it was over. The infusion went smoothly. "Now we wait for Samuel's body to accept the marrow. The next few days are critical." Adrian nodded, tears spilling. He turned to Amara, hoping to share the relief, but she only looked at him long and deep, her eyes filled with gratitude and fear. She said nothing, yet Adrian understood. The battle was far from over, and love, like the body, needed time to heal. That night, when the hospital fell quiet, Amara allowed Adrian to sit by Samuel's bed. The boy slept soundly, breath shallow but steady. Adrian clasped his son's hand, whispering, "I'm here now, Sam, and I'll never leave again." In the doorway, Amara stood watching silently. Tears slipped down her cheeks, tears that, for the first time in many years, were not born of pain, but of the fragile spark of hope rekindling in a heart once shattered. Nights in a hospital are unlike nights anywhere else. They hold no soothing silence, no gentle peace. Here, night is lit by cold fluorescent bulbs, its rhythm kept by the steady beep-beep of monitors, its breath heavy with disinfectant, reminding everyone that they stand on the border between life and death. Adrian Clarke had lived through many sleepless nights spent racking his brain for investors in his first startup, nights buried in his studio, painting until his hands trembled, nights in his Thameside penthouse, staring at the ceiling with a glass of expensive wine in hand. But none were like this one, sitting on a hard plastic chair, back against the wall, eyes fixed on the hospital bed where Samuel lay. The boy slept, his frail face pale yet peaceful, and his breath weak but steady. More than 12 hours had passed since the transplant, and his vitals were holding. Dr. Patel had said it would take at least 3 weeks to know if the marrow would take, but stability itself was a minor miracle. Amara sat opposite Adrian, on the other side of the bed. She never took her eyes off their son, her hand brushing his hair occasionally, as if each tender touch might anchor him to life. She wore her white coat, but the doctor's badge was gone. At that moment, she was only a mother. Around midnight, Samuel stirred, letting out a faint moan. Amara rose instantly, adjusting his blanket and checking the IV line. Adrian sprang up too, clumsily asking, "Should we call a doctor?" Amara shook her head. "Just a side effect. It'll pass." She sat back down, leaning heavily against the chair. For the first time, Adrian noticed the shadows beneath her eyes, the hollowness of her cheeks. 20 years as a single mother, and now months of sleepless nights by their son's side, she was worn thin. A pang of guilt stabbed Adrian's chest, as though every mark of exhaustion on her body had been carved by his hand. "Did you ever hate me?" Adrian asked, voice rough. Amara turned to him, fire flaring in her gaze. "Yes, every day, every night, in every contraction. When I gave birth alone, I had to prove I could raise him alone in every battle with social workers. My belly was swollen with his weight in every exam I took while working double shifts. I hated you so much, I thought I would suffocate on it." Adrian bowed his head, hands clenching until his nails dug into skin. "But," Amara's voice softened, "then Sam was born, and when I looked into his eyes, I knew I couldn't let hatred poison him. So I told him another story, that his father loved art and loved me, but had to go away. I didn't lie, but didn't give him the whole truth. I kept the ugly part for myself." "Amara," Adrian's voice shook, eyes wet. You wish you hadn't left," she cut in. "Too late. You made your choice, and you live with it. So do I. We've both paid the price. The question is, what will you do with this second chance?" The room was quiet, broken only by Samuel's breathing and the steady beep of the monitor. Adrian lifted his head, meeting her gaze. "I won't run again. I'll stay, whether you want me to. Sam needs a father, and I'll be here for him." Amara studied him for a long time, searching for cracks in his promise. At last, she gave a faint nod, saying nothing, but Adrian caught a fleeting softness in her eyes, the light he had longed for across 20 years. The night stretched on. Around 3 in the morning, Amara dozed off in her chair, head tilted, hair spilling across her shoulders. Adrian rose quietly, took a thin blanket, and draped it over her. Watching her sleep, his chest tightened. Because of him, this woman had carried everything alone, raising their son, enduring loneliness, bearing society's judgment. And he had chosen the easy road, running away, hiding behind glass walls and wealth. In the dim hospital night, Adrian made himself vow never to leave her alone again, not just for Samuel, but for her, for the love that had never died inside him. When dawn's pale light crept through the high windows, Adrian was still there, back aching, eyes hollow, yet feeling a peace he hadn't known in decades. This first white night beside his son and the woman he loved had taught him more than 20 years of running, that true love never dies, it only waits for its chance to live again. The first days after the transplant passed with a strange rhythm, slow yet taut. Within each hour, there were moments of peace when it seemed Samuel had escaped the scythe of death, and moments when the silence of the machines made everyone's heart stop. Adrian barely left the bedside. He allowed himself only short naps in the hard plastic chair against the wall, his hand always clasping his son's. Samuel was weak, but lucid. Sometimes he opened his eyes for only a few minutes before drifting back asleep. Still, in those minutes, he studied his father with a strange gaze, half skeptical, half familiar, as if trying to find in that gaunt face the fragment he had carried in imagination for 21 years. Adrian felt the weight of that look, joy and sorrow twined together. He didn't know how to compensate for the lost years, but at least he understood this. He was here now, and that was the first step. One afternoon, rare sunlight broke through Manchester's clouds and streamed into the window. Samuel stirred. Amara was instantly at his side, checking his pulse and feeling his forehead. Samuel smiled faintly, then whispered, "Mom, I want to draw." Amara froze. Draw? Are you sure you're strong enough? He nodded, his eyes shining despite his frail body. Adrian jumped in at once. I'll get you paper and pencils. He rose too quickly, ignoring the ache in his back from the marrow procedure. Grace Mbaya, the kind nurse, overheard and returned moments later with a pad of paper and colored pencils. Samuel accepted them, hands trembling yet steady in resolve. He propped the paper on his lap, leaned against the pillows, and focused as though the world outside no longer existed. The first lines were clumsy, but soon steadied. Samuel drew a barren tree standing in cracked soil, and from its trunk, a single fragile shoot sprouting upward toward the light breaking from the sky. He paused, lifted his head, and asked his father, "What do you think?" Adrian's voice broke. "I think that's you, and I'm proud." Samuel smiled, and for a moment, his pale face was radiant. Amara stood watching, her chest tight with a feeling she could not name, warmth mixed with ache. For 20 years, it had always been just her and her son. With this missing piece suddenly present, the picture felt both unfamiliar and profoundly right. From that day on, Samuel drew nearly every day. However frail, he begged to hold the pencil. He sketched the nurses, the doctors who watched over him night and day. He drew his mother, her eyes anxious yet bright. He pulled himself onto the bed, his gaze fixed on the window and the imagined blue sky beyond. Each drawing pulsed with fierce vitality, filling the ward with energy. Adrian was drawn into this rhythm. One afternoon, when Samuel begged him to sit and help shade a sketch, Adrian hesitated, then picked up the pencil. A flood of memory coursed through him, making his hand tremble. It had been over 20 years since he had truly drawn, since the day he left Amara. But as his son waited, he let memory guide him. The first strokes were stiff, then loosened, flowing. Samuel's eyes widened. "You're excellent. Mom said you used to be an artist. I didn't believe her." Adrian laughed softly, his nose stinging. "I once was, Sam. Then I forgot. You've reminded me." From then on, father and son turned long hospital hours into shared art sessions. Paper and pencils cluttered the bed. Drawings covered the walls until room 612 became a miniature gallery. Nurses dropped by to admire them, asking Samuel for autographs. Even Dr. Patel chuckled when he saw himself sketched with glasses sliding down his nose. Amara, at first only observing, was soon pulled in. One day, Samuel teased, "Mom, you try." She blushed. "I have no talent," Adrian added with a rare smile. "Not true. You had a great eye for color. Remember that painting you did in our first year?" Amara shot him a look, but her lips curved faintly. Old memories stirred awake, softening the distance between them. And so, art became the language reconnecting the three of them daily. No apologies, no promises, just through the strokes of a pencil. They began to find each other again, piecing together the fragments of a family once thought broken. Rumors of the hospital gallery spread through Street Marys. People, from young nurses to seasoned doctors, paused in the corridor to admire Samuel's work. Some suggested the hospital host a small exhibition to raise funds for other sick children. Adrian watched with wordless emotion. He had once believed talent could bloom only in studios or grand galleries, yet his son proved the opposite. Art could flourish, even in a sterile hospital room, so long as the heart was brave enough to create. One morning, Margaret O'Connor, Samuel's art teacher, visited. A silver-haired woman with paint-stained hands and a warm smile. She embraced her fragile student and pulled a thick folder from her bag. "Samuel has entered more competitions than you think," she said, eyes glistening. "I kept all his submissions." Adrian opened the folder. Before him was his son's world. Sketches of the working-class neighborhood where he grew up. Watercolor scenes of polluted rivers mingled with natural beauty. Portraits of friends laughing in sunlight. Each piece was alive, brimming with story. Adrian's vision blurred with tears. "You've drawn so much, and I never knew." Samuel smiled gently. "Mom always encouraged me, and she said you once believed art could change lives." Adrian lifted his gaze to Amara's eyes. She said nothing, but a trace of softness flickered there. He whispered to his son, "I did believe, but I forgot. You've reminded me." Father and son forged a silent pact from that day to learn art together. Adrian brought better paper, richer colors. They spent hours side by side, Samuel drawing, Adrian teaching how to capture light and depth. Sometimes Adrian sketched his son's face thin, but eyes fierce, and Samuel laughed. "You make me look too serious." "I'm not that serious." At night, when Amara dozed off in the chair, Samuel whispered, "Why did you stop painting?" Adrian stayed silent for a long time, then confessed, "Because I was afraid. Every time I held a brush, I remembered your mother, remembered what I lost. I thought success and money could fill that emptiness. But they never did." Samuel, his face calm beyond his years, replied, "Then start again. We'll do it together. You teach me, and I'll remind you why you loved it." The words felt like a warm hand pressed to Adrian's heart. He nodded, tears streaming. Amara saw the change. She saw Samuel's eyes light up whenever Adrian entered the room. She saw Adrian, still sore from surgery, spend hours bent over paper to guide his son. A part of her heart, hardened for decades, began to soften, yet fear still lingered. Fear that Adrian might disappear again and Samuel would shatter if he did. One evening, when Samuel slept, Amara pulled Adrian into the corridor. Her voice was low but sharp. "What are your intentions? To stay a few months, then run back to London? To vanish again?" Adrian met her eyes without flinching. "I'm not leaving. Ever. The company can live without me. Samuel can't. And I can't live another day if I abandon him again." Amara bit her lip, silent. She wanted to believe, but 20 years had taught her caution. Still, in her heart, a small flame flickered again, fragile, but real. Samuel completed a new drawing the next day. 3 figures, hand in hand beneath the sun, leaving the shadows behind. When Adrian saw it, his voice broke. "Who are they, son?" Samuel answered, "It's what I want. The 3 of us, together. Not just in here, but out there." Behind them, Amara's eyes blurred. She dared not speak, afraid that if she opened her mouth, the tears would pour out. After 3 weeks, Samuel's health began to show real improvement. His blood count stabilized, and his body no longer reacted violently to the new marrow. Dr. Patel called it a sign of acceptance, a vital step toward recovery. For Amara, every number on the chart was a miracle. For Adrian, each passing day felt like a fragment of time stolen from the past, now finally returned to him. But as Samuel grew stronger, other worries arose. The hospital could not be their home forever. One day, Amara entered the room holding a stack of documents. Samuel was sketching while Adrian sat beside him, mixing colors. At the doorway, Amara hesitated before speaking. "They called from London. Great Ormond Street Hospital wants me to head their pediatric surgery team. The contract starts next month." The room fell silent. Adrian looked up, the pencil slipping from his hand. Samuel frowned, glancing between his mother and father. Amara drew a breath. "This is the opportunity I once dreamed of, an international team, a massive research budget, patients from all over the world. But it also means we'd have to move to London." Samuel said nothing, his expression shifting from excitement to unease. He looked at Adrian, who sat frozen. Adrian exhaled slowly, his chest in turmoil. London, the city that had been his kingdom, was now the place that might take Amara and Samuel away from him. He wanted to hold them here, to cry out that Manchester was enough and needed them here. But he knew London was Amara's lifelong dream, and he no longer had the right to stand in her way. The silence grew heavy. At last, Samuel laid down his pencil and whispered, "If that's what you want, Mom, then we should go. But I don't want to lose Dad." Amara looked at her son. Then at Adrian. Conflict burned in her eyes. She had relied only on herself for years, never daring to dream of a whole family. With the door cracked open, fear rushed in, fear of trusting Adrian again, of giving him the right to be husband and father, only to be abandoned once more. That night, after Samuel slept, she and Adrian stepped into the empty corridor. Harsh neon light washed their faces, weary but alert. "You plan to accept, don't you?" Adrian asked, his voice low. "I don't know. Amara's gaze drifted far away. Once, I thought I'd seize it instantly if such a chance came. But now, everything is different. How different? Samuel needs stability. He needs family. I'm not sure London can give him that. Adrian stepped closer, his voice firm. I can give him that. I lost 20 years, but I swear I won't lose more. If you go, I'll go. If you stay, I'll stay. Just give me the chance. Amara's eyes locked onto his. You make it sound so easy. But what about your company? The career you've built your whole life? I have Dorian, my partner. The company doesn't need me the way Samuel needs a father. The way you might need me. The last words hung in the air, silencing them both. Amara's chest tightened. She had imagined hearing such a confession countless times, but now that it was real, fear pressed heavier than longing. Before she could answer, a voice sounded behind them. Am I interrupting? They turned. At the end of the corridor stood Richard Bennett, a renowned surgeon, Amara's former colleague, and a man who had pursued her more than once. Dressed in a shirt and long coat, he wore a calm expression and a confident smile. Richard. Amara's voice trembled with surprise. He approached, nodding curtly at Adrian before addressing Amara. I heard about Samuel, so I came, and because I have something to say. Adrian felt his blood turn cold. He knew what was coming. Richard met Amara's eyes. When you're ready, when Samuel recovers, I want you to consider my proposal seriously. I've waited a long time, Amara. I can give you and your son a stable, safe life. The corridor seemed suddenly crowded, though only 3 stood there. Amara froze. Adrian clenched his fists, fury sparking inside him, but also fear. Fear that Richard was the safer choice, the sensible one, the kind of security Amara deserved after years of carrying everything alone. Amara said nothing. She looked from Richard to Adrian, seeing 2 divergent paths. Safety on one side, a love that once betrayed her on the other. Her heart quivered. When Richard finally left, his words lingered like tolling bells. Amara leaned against the wall, clutching the files to her chest. Adrian stood rigid, his dark eyes burning. I won't let him take you from me, he rasped. Amara spun toward him, eyes sharp and trembling. This isn't a competition, Adrian. I'm the one who chooses. Not you. Not Richard. Her words cut clean, but fair. Adrian bit down on his anger. She was right. For 20 years, he had no claim on her. Now, if he wanted to stay, he would have to listen without control, without demand. Back in the room, Samuel slept peacefully. Amara sat by his side, stroking his hair. Adrian stood across the bed, his chest swelling with longing, but also fear of being pushed out again. The next day, Samuel was stronger. He drew 3 paths, one lined with flowers, one paved smooth with stone, one rough with obstacles. In the middle, a small figure held a paintbrush, undecided. That's Mom, Samuel explained, eyes shining. She has to choose a road. I don't know which one she'll take. I hope it leads to light. Amara's eyes filled. Adrian stayed silent, but his heart twisted. Samuel had unknowingly painted their truth. Richard was the smooth, safe road. Adrian, the rough, risky one. And perhaps somewhere else, another road one Amara would choose for herself. That night, Amara and Adrian sat in the waiting lounge. She set down a cup of coffee, her voice weary but sincere. What do you think I should do? Adrian froze. He hadn't expected her to ask. The words, choose me, rose to his lips, but he swallowed them. Meeting her eyes, he spoke slowly. You should choose whatever makes you happiest, not for me or Richard. If that means being with me, I'll be grateful. If not, I'll accept it. As long as you and Samuel are safe. Amara stared at him, startled. She had expected Adrian to fight, to demand. Instead, he showed patience, unlike the impulsive boy she once knew. And for the first time, she believed his change might be real. Days later, Richard returned, this time carrying a small velvet box. Before Amara and Samuel, he opened it, revealing a diamond ring that glittered under the hospital lights. Amara, Richard said firmly, I can give you stability, a home, a future free of storms. You don't have to bear everything alone. Let me stand beside you." Samuel looked at his mother, then at his father. He said nothing, but his eyes tilted toward Adrian as if asking, "What will you do?" Adrian rose, heart hammering. He didn't want to lose Amara again, but remembered his vow not to impose. He stepped forward, placed a hand on her shoulder, and said softly, "You know what your heart wants. Don't let a ring or promises of safety blur that truth." Amara trembled. She looked at the dazzling ring, then at Richard's steady face, and finally at Adrian, worn, repentant, yet filled with love. Her heart waged its war. Reason urged Richard, but her soul called Adrian. She inhaled deeply, closed the box, and pressed it back into Richard's hand. "Richard, I'm grateful. You are a good man. Any woman would be lucky to have you. But my heart, it has never stopped belonging to someone else. I can't lie to you, and I can't lie to myself." Richard froze, his lips tightened, but he nodded, sorrow glinting in his eyes. "I understand. I only wish you happiness, Amara." He turned, his tall frame disappearing through the door. The room fell still with only 3 left. Samuel sighed with relief, smiling faintly. Adrian stared at Amara, hardly daring to believe. You chose me?" he whispered, voice shaking. Amara met his eyes, wet but resolute. "I didn't choose you, Adrian. I chose myself. And in that choice, there is you, and Samuel." In that moment, Adrian's heart burst. He stepped forward and grasped her hand. No more words were needed. Silence wrapped them, but it was the silence of understanding, of a love tested by 20 years, finally finding its way home. The wheelchair rolled slowly past the gates of St. Mary's, carrying Samuel out of the hospital after more than 2 months. That day, Manchester's sky was uncharacteristically clear, a thin sunlight falling across Samuel's face, making it glow. Amara walked beside him, one hand on the chair, the other shading his eyes. Adrian walked on the other side, carrying a small bag, his gaze never leaving his son, as if looking away for even a second might cause him to vanish. Samuel inhaled deeply, then smiled. "I'd forgotten what it smells like out here. Not disinfectant, not plastic. It smells like freedom." Amara squeezed his shoulder gently. "As long as you stay healthy, freedom will stay with you." Adrian smiled too, though his chest swelled with emotion. He remembered the moment he first learned his son's name, in his cold London office, and how 20 years of distance now felt like a nightmare slowly dissolving. Samuel was here alive, smiling, calling him Dad. A few days later, the 3 boarded a train for London. This journey was different from Adrian's first, no longer heavy with dread, but like a homecoming. Samuel sat by the window, sketching non-stop in his notebook. Amara read through documents for her new job. Adrian watched them both, his heart overflowing with gratitude that words could never express. As the train entered the capital, the atmosphere shifted. Skyscrapers, blazing billboards, crowds rushing in waves. Amara closed her file and gazed out the window, eyes caught between worry and hope. Samuel was excitedly eyed, pointing out buildings like a child on his first outing. Adrian knew. This was more than a journey. This was a new chapter. London was no longer the city of money and power. He once ruled it was where his family would begin again. Their new apartment was in a modern complex near Regent's Park, modest but bright, with a balcony overlooking the grass. Samuel immediately claimed a corner near the window for his studio, setting up an easel and arranging his paints. Amara laughed. "You've just left the hospital and are already thinking about painting." "It helps me breathe, Mom," Samuel answered, eyes shining. "I want to paint everything to prove I'm still here." Adrian helped him set up, heart thrumming like a young artist rediscovering his studio. Touching the brushes, he remembered the student days with Amara and smiled without realizing. They ate dinner together on the balcony on their first night in London. Roast chicken, potatoes, and salad, simple, yet to Adrian, it was the most delicious meal of his life. Samuel's laughter, Amara's gentle gaze, everything told him he was finally home. But London was not only a new beginning but also a trial. The next day, Amara started at Great Ormond Street Hospital. The schedule was relentless, complex surgeries, tense meetings. She came home late, exhausted, but her eyes still shone. Adrian watched, proud and anxious at once. He knew her path would not be easy. Samuel, too, grew busy. He was invited to join an exhibition for talented young artists at the Youth Art Museum. Theme: rebirth. The news made him tremble with excitement. "Mom, Dad, this is the chance I've dreamed of, but I don't want to do it alone." He turned to Adrian. "They asked if I'd collaborate with a family member to tell a shared story. Will you paint with me?" Adrian froze. For 20 years, he had buried the brush. Now his son was pulling him back. Swallowing hard, he nodded. "Yes, with you." From then on, father and son threw themselves into the project. They sketched, argued, and revised. Samuel envisioned a forest burned to ash, then reborn. Adrian suggested a family standing in its heart, hand in hand, light shining down. Slowly, the canvas grew, Samuel's youthful fire blending with Adrian's depth. Amara often stood aside, heart stirring. She watched the two men in her life bent over the same canvas, and for the first time in years, she believed in miracles. That family was not only blood, but also love, art, and choice. The museum buzzed with anticipation. Samuel spent nearly all his time in his makeshift studio corner, Adrian at his side. When Amara left for surgery each morning, she paused at the doorway to see them paint-stained sleeves, faces alight with focus. The sight eased her fatigue, carrying her through the day. Samuel demanded perfection, sometimes staying up late to adjust shades of color. Adrian kept vigil, mixing pigments, sometimes just watching. He felt alive again, as in his youth, but this time, not alone. Before him was a son who carried both his and Amara's dreams. One evening, Amara found Samuel asleep at the table, brush in hand. Adrian gently lifted him and laid him on the bed. Watching, Amara's throat tightened. When Adrian returned, she whispered, "You've really changed." Adrian smiled softly, "Maybe because I finally found something worth changing for." Their eyes met, no longer cold. Amid the chaos, a fragile trust began to grow. The museum was packed on opening day: parents, students, and local journalists. Samuel wore a crisp white shirt, thin but radiant. Adrian stood beside him, chest swelling with pride. Their painting, "The Forest Reborn," hung in the center. It showed a forest reduced to ashes, yet sprouted green shoots from the ruins. In its midst stood three figures: a mother, a father, and a boy, hand in hand beneath a shaft of light. When the veil was lifted, the hall gasped. Viewers lingered, studying each detail. A reporter asked Samuel, "Why did you paint a family in the middle of the forest?" Samuel's voice rang steady. "Because I believe families are like forests. Even after fire, after loss, they can grow back from the ashes if those within hold on to each other." Applause thundered. Amara wiped her tears. Adrian stood frozen, his heart melting, wondering if he had ever felt prouder. Afterward, media coverage flourished. Collectors offered to buy the painting, but Samuel refused. "It's our story. I won't sell it." Adrian agreed. Some works, he knew, were not for sale. They were testimonies of love, loss, and rebirth. As weeks passed, London became a true home. Surgeries consumed Amara. Adrian spent time advising the company and caring for Samuel. He began painting seriously again, canvases filling the apartment. Samuel sometimes critiqued boldly, "Your lighting's too old-fashioned, Dad. Be bolder." Adrian laughed, letting his son grade him. Evenings were spent together at the table, sharing stories. For Amara, it was a luxury she had never known in 20 years. For Samuel, it was a simple joy, immense in its power. For Adrian, it was nothing less than a miracle. Yet beneath the peace, challenges lingered. Samuel's health remained fragile, relapse always a shadow, and between Amara and Adrian, old scars had not vanished. A single careless word could thicken the air. One evening after dinner, Amara asked quietly, "Are you sure you'll stay?" "What about your company?" Adrian interrupted firmly, "Dorian can manage. I want to be here with you, with Samuel." Amara searched his eyes. She saw resolve and the ghost of the man who had once left her. She nodded slightly, but her heart kept a trace of caution. Trust, like Samuel's healing body, needed time. At last, one spring morning, Samuel unveiled a new painting. A family on a balcony, London glowing behind them. Beneath it, he had written, "Return, but this time, to stay." Amara embraced her son, tears streaming. Adrian placed his hand on their shoulders and whispered, "Yes, Sam, this time I stay, forever." London glowed in long rays of sunlight and cool, gentle nights that summer. In their small apartment near Regent's Park, the family of three lived days they had once never dared to dream. Samuel was strong again, his hair thick, his face no longer pale but alive with energy. He began attending school part-time, pursuing art with a passion fiercer than ever. After 20 years of burial in numbers and boardrooms, Adrian rediscovered himself on the canvas. His new paintings brimmed with light, still a little awkward after so long without a brush, yet warm and sincere. Sometimes he and Samuel painted late into the night, debating colors and strokes like two companions, forgetting the gulf of years between them. Amara watched them, both proud and astonished. The man who had once broken her heart was now a devoted father, a true partner to their son. And she, after long days of grueling surgeries, would return home to find them there and feel that every sacrifice of the past 20 years had finally found its meaning. One evening, after a simple dinner, Samuel placed a sheet of paper on the table. "I've been offered a summer scholarship at an art school in Venice. 3 weeks of studying with young artists from across Europe. I want to go." Amara froze. The thought of letting him go so soon after the transplant stirred fear. "Are you sure your health will allow it?" Samuel nodded firmly. "Dr. Patel reviewed my file. He said I'll be fine as long as I keep to my regimen. I don't want to live like a patient forever. I want to be myself." Adrian looked at his son with pride and worry. He remembered his own youthful hunger to see the world, and understood. He turned to Amara. "You should let him go. He's fought long enough. Now he deserves to see the world beyond hospital walls." Amara was silent for a long time, then sighed. "All right, but you'll go with him." Samuel laughed aloud. "Perfect. Dad and I will paint Venice, every street, every canal." And so, that summer, Adrian and his son set foot in Italy. They sent Amara sketch after sketch: the Rialto Bridge, Piazza San Marco, gondolas drifting along the canals. In every drawing, she saw Samuel brimming with life, Adrian radiant in a way she had never seen before. When they returned, they brought paintings and a special gift, a joint canvas titled "The Heart's Return." In it, a woman stood on a balcony, arms outstretched. On the steps below, two figures, a father and son, climbed upward, hand in hand. Golden light bathed all three, holding them in an invisible embrace. Amara wept at the sight. Samuel whispered, "Mom, I painted this because I know everything we have today is because you never gave up." Adrian added, "And because you believed that the heart would find its way home one day." That night, their apartment filled with tears, laughter, and the steady rhythm of three hearts beating as one. At last, after so much wandering, their family had truly come home. Autumn swept into London in a blaze of gold. Samuel began his new school year, no longer the frail patient, but a young man full of energy, carrying both his artistic dreams and the quiet pride of having defeated death. Amara watched him walk into school, her chest swelling. She knew the hardship had forged in him a resilience rare among his peers. Adrian remained faithfully by their side, the devoted father Amara had once believed impossible. He took Samuel to school, brought him home, and spent hours painting with him. More than that, he had learned patience, silence, and how not to decide for others as he once had. One evening, after Samuel had gone to bed, Adrian and Amara sat together on the balcony, the city glittering below. The autumn wind carried the scent of dry leaves. Adrian turned to her, his voice low but steady. "Amara, I know I caused you too much pain. I won't ask you to forget, it can't be forgotten. But I ask for one thing. Let me walk with you. Not as a man seeking redemption, but as a partner in life." Amara was silent, eyes fixed on the distant lights. Her heart trembled. 20 years ago, she had longed for a proposal from this very man, yet only received abandonment. Now, After everything, the words had returned. She turned, her voice soft but clear. "You don't need to ask. I've already chosen. I chose you, Samuel, this family. But Adrian, you must promise. Never again let fear dictate your choices." Adrian clasped her hand, eyes ablaze. "I promise. This time with all my heart." Time passed, and their story began to spread. The marrow transplant and the painting, the reborn forest, appeared in newspapers, not as sensational headlines, but as proof of the power of love and art. Samuel's school created a gallery corner for his works. Art from Hope. The pinnacle came when Samuel and Adrian were invited to a small international exhibition in Paris. They brought The Heart's Return. On opening night, the hall erupted in applause when the veil was lifted. An elderly critic rose and declared, "This is more than a painting. It is a symphony of homecoming. It reminds us that no matter how far we stray, the heart always knows the way back." Amara, sitting in the audience, wept freely. She felt that every tear, every scar of the last 20 years had been redeemed in this moment. That night, the three walked along the Seine. Samuel strode ahead, photographing the bridges lit with gold. Adrian and Amara walked behind, hand in hand. He whispered, "I once thought success was the summit, but now I know the greatest success of my life is holding your hand, walking beside our son." Amara smiled, leaning into him, "And my greatest success was never giving up, so I could stand here, hearing those words." Beneath the starlit Paris sky, three people once broken, once lost, once scarred had finally found their way back to each other. And in that quiet, they knew. This was not merely an ending. This was the beginning of a new journey. A journey they would walk together, no longer afraid, no longer alone, because, after all, the heart always finds its way home.